Today on Pilgrim Radio's His People, Dan Chung on ministering to the traumas of North Korean refugees.
North Koreans in North Korea are sold a bill of lies. They are told that their leaders are literal gods. Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea, who is long since passed, is still the eternal president of North Korea. And people are instructed to bow to his statue when they encounter it. So you would think, after these women escape, after these people escape, and they realize they've been lied to, you would think that they would just eschew religion altogether. They would say, well, I'm just in it for myself now. I don't believe in anything. We really see a spiritual vacuum appear in their hearts, and it's a God-shaped hole that all of us have that can only be filled by the loving kindness of Jesus Christ. And so the only real fulfilling relationship that seems to be durable in their lives is one with Christ.
Dan Chung next. For over 20 years, Dan Chung has lived and worked alongside North Korean refugees, witnessing firsthand the psychological and spiritual devastation caused by one of the world's most repressive regimes. In his new book, A Hard Freedom, The Dreams and Trauma of North Korean Refugees, Dan argues that while physical relief is essential, true restoration requires a spiritual foundation. Spencer Dalke contacted Dan to find out more.
Of course, you're a co-founder of Crossing Borders. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do there and how God led you that direction?
Yeah. Crossing Borders is an organization devoted to helping North Koreans and their children. I got started in 2001 when my best friend from college, Mike Kim, took a short-term missions trip to Northeast China. He just was tagging along with a pastor that he knew. They were visiting underground churches. And along the way, this was in 2001, so it was right after the great North Korean famine that happened between 1995 and 1998, in which up to 3 million of North Korea's then 21 million people perished. There was a lot of spillover into China. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of news about North Korea's famine because North Korea wasn't exactly forthright about people dying in mass in their country. They're very cagey about what happens in their country. So Mike heard all these stories. He met this one girl. He showed me her pictures, and she was 14 years old, but she looked like she was 7 years old. And that was the effects of starvation. It causes something called stunting, where people are generally shorter and puberty is delayed. He also told me other horrific stories about North Koreans who escaped into China, who were then sold or trafficked in that country. And these stories really stuck with me. They really affected me deeply. I couldn't explain it. I didn't grow up knowing that much about North Korea. My family really didn't talk about it, nor did we have a lot of ties into North Korea historically. I just started going on a deep dive into North Korea, and so did Mike. He moved out to China on January 1st, 2003, and I just wanted to help my friend along with other of our friend group. We just wanted to support our friend, and we got incorporated a couple of years later, but that was the start of the organization.
So it's been at least 2 decades now that I guess you've been working with this ministry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How's your understanding of the needs of North Korean refugees shifted over that time?
At first, it was a very dire situation because people were starving and there was extreme malnourishment. And so as people poured out into China during those years, it was more of a relief effort, getting people to eat and money to people who desperately needed it. As the years marched on, North Korea's food situation has improved. I wouldn't say it's great. There is still malnourishment, but mass starvation has largely been averted since that time. Today, as we have built a network in China of small communities of North Korean refugees who meet and gather for worship, and we have staff who facilitate that, we have shifted more into community building because the work that we do in China is illegal, and at any moment we could be kicked out of the country. Our staff could be arrested. So we wanted to build networks of people who could survive and sustain themselves without us. That's what we currently do in China. Now in 2020, we realized that there was a lot of need in the North Korean refugee community in South Korea as well. And so we started a safe house for North Korean refugee women there, as well as a suite of community classes.
I understand that your mission at Crossing Borders is to show the compassion of Christ to North Koreans, their children, like you mentioned. How does that faith foundation play out in how you minister to these people at these safe houses in these very dangerous countries?
First and foremost, we need the heart of Christ in everything that we do. North Koreans in North Korea are sold a bill of lies. They are told that their leaders are literal gods. Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea, who is long since passed, is still the eternal president of North Korea. And there are many legends around his godlike abilities. And people are instructed to bow to his statue when they encounter it. So as many of the gods that human beings have constructed over time, these gods as well are very temperamental, and I would say very selfish. They use the resources of their country for themselves, to enrich themselves. For example, during the famine, as people were starving to death en masse, bodies were piling up along streets, they were throwing themselves wild parties. Pizza parties with chefs from Italy, sushi parties with chefs from Japan. They had American pro wrestlers come in to entertain him and the cadre of leadership that he had surrounding him. And so what they need is the loving hand of grace, the grace of Jesus Christ. And you would think, after these women escape, after these people escape, and they realize they've been lied to, you would think that they would just eschew religion altogether. They would say, well, I'm just in it for myself now. I don't believe in anything. That's sort of the Western mindset. We really see a spiritual vacuum appear in their hearts, and it's a God-shaped hole that all of us have, that can only be filled by the loving kindness of Jesus Christ. And so with these God-like men in North Korea who just take from their people, and then as they get sold in China in the human trafficking ring there, which is vast, they see men who think that they own these women and take everything they can from them. The only real fulfilling relationship that seems to be durable in their lives is one with Christ. We do want to show them Christ's compassion for them, which is even different from my compassion and our workers who are very compassionate, but Christ's compassionate is even different from that. And once they see it, true healing, that is not the only path to true healing. As for their traumas, I believe they can heal somewhat from their traumas, but true and deep healing we see happening with a relationship with Christ.
We in the West, especially in America, where we really are very privileged to live in a free society that's rooted historically in the Christian faith. But we do, I guess, hear stories maybe of people escaping North Korea and crossing the border into South Korea. And we think, oh, they are safe now and now they're thriving. But I understand that you also, that physical freedom is only really, I guess, what you call the second escape. If that's true, what do you mean by that?
I was in South Korea teaching a class to free North Korean people. And there was this one student who afterwards we got to talking. I call her Becky in my book. She said that she couldn't sleep. And that is sign number one of trauma. The experts tell me that this whole population, about 33,000 men and women who've escaped, most of them need medication to sleep. Well, she was telling me that she was sold in China. And about a year after she was sold, she had a child with her husband. And about a month after she had the child, she was arrested and sent back to North Korea. This is China's practice. It is forced repatriation, where North Koreans will 99.9% of the time spend time in their North Korea system of prison camps, which have been compared to Nazi concentration camps. They're, in my book, I call them torture machines. They are finely tuned machines to optimize to bring anguish and torture. They use forced starvation, hard labor, and myriad of other ways to bring anguish to them. So Becky spent 4 months in these camps. She escaped back into China and was reunited with her family, but she was never the same after that. And she was telling me this. In China, she used to sleep after she got out of North Korea again. She used to sleep with shoes next to her head in case the police came. She could make a run for it. Well, in South Korea, there was no threat of that. And yet the only way that she could sleep was through medication and to have those shoes next to her head. I think that is the essence of trauma. It's these adaptations that you make because of very difficult and threatening circumstances that stay with you even though you are completely safe and thus hinder your life when you're safe. Another example of this is a fear of anyone in uniform. From these women time in China, they are all under threat of that prison camp if they are caught in China. Whenever they see anyone in uniform, it doesn't even have to be a police officer, they go to a level of stress that you and I do not experience on a day-to-day level, even on a subway trying to get to their job, their home. When they see police officers, they often are paralyzed with fear. And that fear is useful in their old life, but it stays with them and it's completely disruptive to them, even though they are politically free.
I understand in your book you're collecting a lot of testimony from the traumas of these people that have escaped from North Korea. What do you observe being the most common psychological, social struggles that these refugees suffer from?
Well, like I said, sleep is a very, very common issue, and that can spiral into a lot of different things. There's a thing called dissociation. I don't know if that's a technical term. I think that is, where, again, when you're trapped in a situation and you have nowhere to go, the mind has this amazing ability to then remove the self from the body. Let's say you are being assaulted by a man repeatedly. After a while, your mind could escape from that physical, visceral experience and retreat into itself. This is very common in this population. About 70% of all North Koreans who have escaped are women. So a lot of women have a lot of trouble being emotionally present for their children. At the first sign of any perceived danger, their minds go somewhere else. And people think that they're dumb, or people think that they have mental issues. But what is really happening is oftentimes at any level of perceived threat, their minds will go somewhere else. And so what we are trying to do as an organization, especially in South Korea, is to remedy that, to help them to connect their mind and their bodies again. And this is done by exercise. This is done by talk therapy. This is done by just building communities where they can talk amongst themselves and share their struggles amongst themselves. There are so many signs, this type of trauma that we see very often in this community.
Well, my guest today is Dan Chung. He's the co-founder and executive director of Crossing Borders, as well as the author of A Hard Freedom, The Dreams and Traumas of North Korean Refugees. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier that's just kind of stuck with me. It's really interesting that the leaders in North Korea are seen as gods. It's so interesting that, we think of communism in the West as it is the most enlightened form of government. We're all going to share everything. But isn't that, from what you've described, is that not just paganism? So do you find most people are trying to escape that for religious reasons? Like, how many of the refugees that you help are actually Christians?
Most of the people that we meet have never heard the name Jesus Christ. North Korea has systematically destroyed Christianity in particular. From the very beginning of the regime, they were on a mission to eradicate pastors, religion. Actually, the capital city, Pyongyang, was once a great Christian hub. And in fact, Billy Graham's wife, Ruth Bell Graham, went to a Christian boarding school in Pyongyang. These are very recent historical things. And so North Korea was once a bright beacon of Christianity. But after the communists came into the country, unfortunately, they went on a mission to destroy Christianity. And so we will see some shadows of Christianity at our safe house in South Korea for women. We have Sunday worship there, and they are not forced to come, but most of them do. And we started singing this song, Fill My Cup. It's a hymn. And she said, "Hey, I heard this song. My grandpa used to sing this to me." And it's very interesting because parents in North Korea can't share the gospel with their children. From a very early age, the government instructs the children of North Korea to rat on their parents if they ever hear the name Jesus and whatever, and then they'll be sent to a prison camp. So even to their own children, they cannot share the gospel. And this woman said that whenever her grandfather was drunk, he sang this Christian song, Fill My Cup. It was sort of like an ironic thing. And I looked up the history of that song, and it actually was written after communism was established in North Korea. And so somewhere, in some way, somehow, this song broke through into North Korea. We don't know how. We'll probably never know how until we get to heaven. And I don't know if this grandfather was singing it like ironically, or if he was only courageous enough to sing it to her when he had some drinks. I don't know. Again, these are the sort of shadows that we see of the church. We know it exists, but it's very mysterious. And, groups like Voice of the Martyrs say that the church is thriving in North Korea today. And so, yeah, there is Christianity. We know that. But by far, most of the people that we help had never heard the name Jesus Christ even as being anywhere near a god or anything like that until they leave North Korea.
How many would you guess do come to faith in Christ from your ministry?
We try not to keep record of that. We think that builds the wrong incentives. These are people who are desperate for resources. And if they perceive that I think it would be better for me if I converted to Christianity for, my own material sake, then they might do that. And we've heard of a lot of instances like that. There's a lot of organizations that work in China who force North Koreans to pray 8 hours a day and read the Bible in order to receive help. And we are very conscious of that. And we for those reasons, we do not keep records. We share the gospel with most of the people that we help, but we don't keep a record of who gets converted because we don't think that sets up the right incentives for us as an organization. But I will say, many of the people that we help in China and even in South Korea have come to faith through our work. I would say most.
Talking a little bit about, I guess, the trauma and things, can you tell us a little bit about how your ministry treats some of these, or cares for these refugees that have been traumatized by their experience trying to escape from North Korea?
We do not employ therapists. I just want to clarify that. So we do not directly do the hard work of clinical psychology. We share the gospel. And so when we see strong signs of trauma, which we do all the time, we refer them over to a clinician. We train our staff to identify trauma, and we train them on what it does to the brain and body. We train them on what that might do to someone's personality. It's an old tired saying that hurt people hurt people. Man, our staff, they're just so patient and loving towards the women in our care who come into, especially Elam House, our safe house. And we just instruct them to love them, to care for them, show them the compassion of Christ and the love of Christ, even though there are many attacks on their personalities, their characters, their careers, their bodies. They've been threatened in every which way. And that is the primary way that we as an organization will treat that trauma, is just by loving them and caring for them. Because most traumatized people have very broken relationships because it's very difficult for them to connect with other people. They often lash out. And so we think that once they come into our doors or our class, if they experience this love that will not flinch when someone attacks us, that will make a difference in their lives and maybe make them open to the gospel as well. There's that. And then, like I said, there are these classes that we run to help them with their trauma. Exercise is such an important way to restore that mind-body connection. And that sounds very fluffy and woo-woo, but it's actually actual science behind that. We think that exercise is a great way. So we have Pilates classes, we have these line dancing classes, and they like it for the exercise. And a lot of the women think that'll help them look better, and that might be the case. But for us, it's really about trauma care, and we want their bodies to move and connect with their mind again, so that they don't recess back into their minds at the slightest provocation. We also think that community is so important. We realize that, especially coming out of the pandemic, about 80% of North Koreans said that they have no community. They don't participate in community. And so these classes, again, the English classes, the exercise classes, we make it very social. We have time before and after for these women to get to know one another and to just talk. That is crucial as well to their mental health and their spiritual health.
What encouragement would you offer our listeners? What encouragement have you experienced ministering to North Korean refugees? Maybe seeing how God is working in some of these instances?
It's amazing. We helped this woman who I refer to as Margaret. She endured the famine. She had a family of 5. She lost her family to starvation. The rest of the 4 of them perished. And she came to China with nothing. And she was sold. But because she was older, they weren't able to sell her to a husband. And so they sold her to a pig farm. Her job was to carry troughs of water up and down a hill from a river to give to the pigs. And after a year, that broke her back. She literally could not stand upright after a year of this for the rest of her life. And so she was no good to the farm. So they sold her again to this very elderly man in China. And that's when she met Crossing Borders, and she received Jesus as her Lord and Savior. And you would think, someone who has had such a hard life, that she would be bitter and that she would want to just take, she would want resources for herself. But it was the opposite. I met her on several occasions in China, and the people we brought to meet her often say that she was the greatest person that they've ever met. She was so generous. After she received Jesus as her Savior, she worked to minister to other refugees in our network. She gave them her money. She called them when they were down. She would resolve disputes amongst them. And she was so patient, so kind. And she actually had cancer, and she died in 2018 in China. To the Chinese government where she died, it was as if nothing happened because she wasn't a technical person in the country. And the impact that she made with her life in those last years after coming to faith was absolutely astonishing. And so if there's any encouragement for that, no matter what has happened to us, no matter what has been taken from us, what we can receive from Christ can heal all of those things. And I've seen it firsthand.
You've been listening to His People on Pilgrim Radio. Many thanks to our guest, Dan Chung, author of the book, A Hard Freedom, The Dreams and Trauma of North Korean Refugees. On tomorrow's program, it's Caitlin Hawk on breaking addiction through new identity in Christ.
We're a slave either to righteousness or we're a slave to sin. And when we become born again, our new nature desires righteousness, and those things that God has planted within us as believers lead to life and the abundant life Jesus promised.
That's tomorrow at the same time, right here on His People. Thanks for listening.